Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. I'm your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by my co-host, Lance LaDuke. Lance, how are you today?
I'm invigorated.
Invigorated? Why, was that because of talking with Dr. Natalie Mannix?
Yeah, actually, it was very invigorating. They're going to all air out of order, but I feel like we're starting to share. We're sharing some, I think, important information about how to get more seats at the table for people that don't look like us, and how to find music, and how to source, like groups that are important to be listening to, composers that you should be listening to, how to find it. So this is not exclusively, but I'm glad that we've been touching on that, and so this was very. I was very excited about talking to Natalie about this, as well as all the other awesome stuff she's done.
Yeah, she's great. I said this during the interview. I'm glad that there are people as thoughtful as her about important stuff that are in positions like she is. She just hosted the International Women's Brass Conference. She's a monster player, by the way. Orchestral, solo. She's wonderful. She plays with Stiletto Brass Quintet, Lantana Trio, which she told us about. Talked about their rehearsals. This is a really good conversation. So I think that you are going to enjoy it. Wanted to thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model Tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke Model Euphonium mouthpiece. Did you know that, Lance?
Ooh,
you should sue them.
No.
They just use your name. It seems a seems a little risky. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you would like to support the show, you could leave a rating and a review either on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get the Brass Junkies. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And without further ado...
Some people never get the Brass Junkies, though.
That's true. There are some people who really don't get it. And they're like, I listened to that last guest who sounded good, and I put up with those two bozos to get a little bit, but yeah, do I really want to do this again?
Does this podcast player have a host filter so I could just hear the guest?
Oh, look at that. This episode's only 18 minutes long. Without further ado, let us get to the conversation that we had with trombonist extraordinaire Dr. Natalie Mannix.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more content by the Brass Junkies, just click on the like and subscribe button. You'll have an opportunity to see some of the greatest brass players in the world, and Andrew and me.
And today on the Brass Junkies, we are joined by a trombonist who is a prolific performer and teacher who currently teaches at the University of North Texas. She just pulled off a huge conference, which we are going to hear her talk all about, and her name is Dr. Natalie Mannix. Natalie, how are you?
Great, how are you?
Good. We're great to be talking to you. You were just in Scotland. Before that, you were hosting the International Women's Brass Conference. You are a busy person, as is everyone who we talk to. That's why we're talking to you, because you do lots of interesting stuff. So it's really nice to be able to actually get you on Zoom to join us today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Let's talk about IWBC, which you just hosted. How long did the preparation for that thing start? When were you awarded that? When did you know that you were hosting?
Yeah, well, that's...
Congratulations. The next couple of years of your life.
Right? I know. It's a lot of work.
It was actually 5 years because we planned...
Oh.
I know. We planned really far in advance. I was told 5 years ago that I was given the conference for what was supposed to be actually last year, but we had to postpone 1 year because of COVID, and so it went from 4 years to 5 years of planning. But luckily, during that time, I had two new colleagues join the University of North Texas, Stacy Mickens and Rachel Samayoa, and I recruited them immediately. Guess what? Welcome to UNT. You're going to be co-hosting the IWBC, which they looked at me with stunned eyes, but Rachel had already hosted it at the University of Northern Kentucky, and so she was a pro at it already and huge help. And so with their help and organizational skills and a very small army of people, we finally had it happen at the end of May.
You know, we have an opportunity, if you're willing to talk about everything that goes into doing that. I don't want to spend the entire time talking about it, but I don't think people understand how many different aspects of putting on a conference somebody like you has to deal with. So can you give kind of like an overview of all of the fires that needed to be put out before you could invite people to come?
Yeah, sure. I mean, facilities first, making sure that you have all of the rooms available. The biggest thing about IWBC are the competitions. And so we had to have 10 rooms simultaneously without sound bleed, with great pianos and good sound acoustics for competitions on the first day. So that was a huge undertaking. Yeah. And so just arranging the facilities was the first piece of the puzzle, and getting all of the rooms and support from our administration, which they were great. The dean and the administration just was so happy to have the conference that they helped make everything happen. And after that, another complication, well, not complication, but great thing, is that it's all brass instruments. And so there are some people that I don't know in different instruments. And so we rely on a lot of recommendations and a team of people to recommend great artists. And then we put out the call for presenters, and the three of us sat down with, I think, 150 proposals and picked 95 presenters for the 4 days. And then the large ensembles to accompany the guest artists at night. And we always have the Monarch Brass play a concert. That's our flagship ensemble, made up of the best brass players in the country. And we also, in the last few conferences, have featured the Athena Brass Band. And so those two ensembles were given. And then I wanted to feature a local ensemble. And so our one of our wind band directors, Eugene Corporon, who conducts our wind ensemble, also conducts the Lone Star Wind Orchestra.
He was my first college band director a million years ago.
Wow, yeah, he's fantastic. And so he has a professional wind orchestra called the Lone Star Wind Orchestra. And that was a big ask, but they were very happy to oblige. And we had soloists play with that group on the first night. And this year we had our first time with a new ensemble called the Chromatic Brass Collective, and that was an ensemble made up entirely of women of color, and we were just so excited to support that group and those great artists that added so much to the conference. So those were like the general things that we were really focused on. There's a whole competition team that focuses on enrolling people in the competitions. We don't turn anybody away. Everybody is allowed to come and compete, and we find a space for them.
That's great.
They all do a live round. And so we had people doing that I don't even know what on. Luckily, everybody was so great at their own job that I had one piece of the puzzle, and Rachel and Stacy and IWBC board members had other pieces, and finding exhibitors. We had a record enrollment this time. It was 800 people.
Wow.
That came to the conference.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it was fantastic.
Congratulations.
Really great. Thank you. Yeah.
I had 3 students from Carnegie Mellon made the trip down, and just like I was getting regular updates and pictures with them posing with some of their idols or the people that they looked up to. I should say.
Oh, that's so nice.
They just were raving about it. They just had a great time.
And I don't think people
So
realize,
big was your team of volunteers? Go ahead. Yeah,
no, I don't think people realize that it's not for women. So, and if you ever go to a conference or see pictures, you'll see equal numbers of both genders there, and it's just a very supportive place, even to our non-binary friends or whatever gender you identify as. We try just to make it welcome for all.
One of the things that I know that my students appreciated that I didn't know that you did was that you could register to be a volunteer, because I would have just assumed that you just beat the bushes in Denton to find all the volunteers. And I know that my students really appreciated it because they got a little bit of a break on tuition, and it made a huge difference for them. And I also, the folks who went down there are the get their hands dirty type anyway. Like, they're the ones that you always like, if I need help moving something, I'm going to hit on those three for sure because they're the go-to. So that was just a really cool. How big of a pool of volunteers do you need to pull off something like this?
It's never enough. I mean, it's always we need more because there are also people that cancel at the last minute, and so then we have to find people there. Like, we need some more volunteers. Who's here? Yeah, I mean, I think, gosh, I would think like 50 volunteers is probably in the right ballpark. And luckily I had a teaching assistant that was her job, basically was volunteer coordinator. And so she coordinated that and got all the folks on a schedule. But we needed, 2 volunteers per room with 3 performing venues going at all times. And not to mention registration volunteers and other places on campus. So yeah, and still I was moving cocktail tables at 8 a.m. somehow, and tablecloths and doing laundry. It was there was never enough people.
Well, and everything always goes according to plan, and nobody's flights are ever delayed, and nobody ever misunderstands, or nobody ever misreads their packet either. So that helps everything, I'm sure.
You figure out when you become a college professor with a class, like you figure out why so many professors read the syllabus to the class on the first day as if they're a bunch of idiots. You're like, I can read, and it's like, no, it's not that you can read, it's whether you're going to. And then it's like the 9 emails that I'm going to get from the people, 2 of which are very mad, when it's like, that's why we're having story time today for the first half hour of your semester.
You can never assume anything with students. That's the number one rule in college teaching: never assume anything.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, Rex Martin could always assume that I was going to show up not looking very good. So that was a say. I took the tuba very seriously, but I always, for 4 straight years, I looked like I had just rolled out of bed. Like even if my lessons were at 3 p.m, I was like, there are people who pay a lot of money to make that, like the I don't care look. It's like, well, no, I just actually didn't. So it was, it was.
So now, did you play as well?
In the conference?
Yeah.
Yeah, our trio, made up of the faculty members, Rachel and Stacy and I, we have a trio called Lantana Trio, and we actually played a new concerto on the first night with the Lone Star Wind Orchestra. That was it, though. We played in Monarch Brass, yeah, so we went to rehearsals and played in that concert, but the first night was our debut performance of a new arrangement by Dorothy Gates.
As if you didn't have enough to do.
When I accepted that, when I came up with that idea, I knew immediately that this is going to be a bad idea. But we always do that to ourselves as musicians, right? You say yes to things and realize, I know I'm going to regret this decision later.
This one's going to leave a mark, yeah.
Yeah.
So where and when is the next conference? And then we can move on to other stuff.
So we don't have a conference in mind yet for stateside, but we are planning a conference in Japan. So we're still in we're still in the planning phases of that. I'm not on that committee, so I don't know the ins and outs yet of that. But nothing has been announced yet for the next United States conference. But they generally go every other year. We'll see if the Japan conference interferes with that regular schedule.
I'd love to hear some more about your trio. About the Lantana Trio. Can you talk to us about how that came to be and
sure.
And what's next?
It was another one of those things. Welcome to UNT. Let's have a trio.
You're like first date 10 minutes in. You're like, I've been thinking about getting married lately. Yeah, I don't want to rush things, but yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So we were actually rehearsing before they actually started teaching. We were rehearsing in August so that we could send a recording in to apply to play at the last IWBC at Arizona State 3 years ago. So we had to get that ball rolling right when they moved in. And we put together a very hasty recording and were accepted to play at that conference. But since then, we've been playing regularly together. We practice. We have a weekly rehearsal, and it's also therapeutic because most of the rehearsal is talking. And it's a nice friendship thing. We're all 3 of us really close now, and we've known each other a little bit on the outside before, just professionally going to IWBC conferences, playing in ensembles together, but not really well. So this was the first time that we got to know each other. And yeah, so now it's been, 4 years that we've been playing together and doing recitals. We just recorded our first CD in May, and the previous May, and we're almost ready now to release it on a label. We're working that out this month. So, and it's all compositions that are relatively new by underrepresented composers. We commissioned 3 new pieces for that, and were one by Jeff Scott, one by Shanice Strickland, and I knew I was going to draw a blank at some point of the third piece that Yvette Harriman Rodriguez, fantastic composition by her. So, and then a few of the other pieces we had been playing for the last few years. But yeah, we're really excited. We're playing a recital at the International Trombone Festival in less than 3 weeks with the same music.
Cool.
So we'll be debuting that program there. Yeah.
Where is ITF?
That's awesome.
It's going to be in Conway, Arkansas, at the University of Central Arkansas.
Right. Yep. I remember now because when we had Jim Nova joined me for a Patreon hang, and and Bruce Fask was on, who teaches at Northern Arkansas, and anyway, Jim was like made some comment about it wasn't anything too bad, but he just made some comment about Arkansas. And then Bruce was like, who was on the hang, he was like, that's interesting because I was going to hire you to come in and work with my students next year. And Jim was like, I love it there. And it was very, all of the other people were laughing very, very, very hard. Yeah, it was good. So,
well, it's convenient for
Speaking
us.
of which, I would like to take a moment to thank the Mary Papert School of Music at Duquesne University in beautiful and sunny Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's a very soothing voice I'm using for this one. Please click on the link in the show notes to be taken to a site that shows you all the ways you can be involved with the music school at Duquesne University in the Mary Papert School. They're a longtime sponsor of the show, and we appreciate it. And very, very, very special thanks to Jim Not Welcome and Arkansas Nova for making it possible.
Oh, that was funny. Your internet crapped out at the very end, so we didn't hear the actual punchline. But before, Bruce is probably already writing the email. It's Arkansas State. I knew it didn't sound right. So like Natalie knew, but she's polite. And so Bruce listens to every episode. So he was probably like, hey, Hitz, with some spicy words. So don't email Lance. He's the one who made me say, what did I say? Northern Arkansas? It's like, that's not even a school.
Northern
That's why I was like, because I knew it wasn't Central. And then I was like, I choked there. And I'm a professional podcaster. Am I though? Now I've got some self-esteem issues going on here. So can I ask you a little bit more? Can I ask you a little more about your trio? How do your rehearsals work? Are the 3 of you all completely equal, in terms of on paper, artistically? Do you all talk about the same amount? Do you does somebody take charge of one piece, or is it all collaborative? Just I think a lot of people find it interesting since so many ensembles work in different ways. How does yours operate?
Yeah, ours is all collaborative. We, it's really who wants to call the piece first, or who has a strong opinion about what piece we want to start with. And usually it's a chop issue, right? And so if it's particularly hard for the trumpet, which trio music for trombone is generally the challenging part for me. Just maintaining my low chops, and it can be mostly in the bass trombone register or just all over, but generally low. But the trumpet tends to be really high, horn too. And so if it's a very choppy piece for one of them, we'll usually start with that piece just to get it out of the way before we're too tired. And we'll take breaks accordingly for that as well. But yeah, we just interject musical ideas and rehearsal ideas as we go. So it's a very organic approach, and sometimes we want to vent about something else that has nothing to do with music, and we end up talking for a half hour and realize, oh no, okay, we have to practice. Let's go back to this piece. There's a lot of laughter though, and it's really fun actually. It's actually very similar to playing in the Stiletto Brass Quintet. Mm-hmm. Though I tend to bow more to the leadership of the founding members of that group, which Amy Gilreath and Velvet Brown, and add something if I feel I have something to add, but let other people dictate the rehearsal pacing and schedule for that.
It's interesting how, like, I think that there can be a perception that, like, that the healthiest setup is always completely equal, like everything, and yet that's not always the case. Like, if it's either understood or explicitly said, like, sometimes it's best when there's someone to steer the ship, and then there are some, and then people, but everyone's empowered when they feel it's important to be able to speak up. But sometimes the fully collaborative thing is, there's a lot of ways that you can set things up, and I think as long as there's communication, then it can always work.
Yeah, and I think that having somebody decide the repertoire and the order is really efficient. I don't mind that at all. I think as long as the people are open to other people's opinions, and I've never had a problem in Navy Band Brass Quintet or Stiletto or any group I've played with people, squashing other people's ideas. Everyone seems very professional in the groups I've played with.
Yeah. And do you ever
I've heard that happens.
Do you ever have a situation where you think something would sound better slower, and Stacy thinks it would sound better faster?
Oh, yeah.
And then what happens if, in a completely respectful and, like, genuine way, like, neither one of you is moving? Is that when Rachel
We
then
vote?
Yeah, there you go.
There's three of us, right?
Yeah.
So that's great. There's not an even number, because then we'd have more trouble.
Right.
No, we usually actually go. And we're nice about it, obviously, but one person thinks the other opposite, and we said, okay, well, let's try it both ways and vote. That's usually how it goes. Unless somebody, we always try and respect a physical challenge. And so if it's going to hurt somebody's face playing it one way, then no one's going to go, no, I insist. We're always very careful about that kind of thing. And it would be more just like a musical choice.
I think one of the things, I've done some facilitation in terms of team training and leadership training, that sort of stuff. And a thing that I don't think we talk enough about in coaching groups is to realize the spectrum of personalities that are in a group, and that some people just tend to be more outgoing and tend to just throw lots of ideas out and to be more talkative. And that if you're being a good colleague, you really need to look for ways for a colleague who might be more shy to have their ideas expressed or heard, because it's not automatic that it will happen. It just struck me that I've done that tons in terms of team building and team training, but less so with chamber music. But it's the exact same phenomenon. So how do you, finding ways for people who tend to be more shy to get their ideas through is a ongoing challenge, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been in situations like that where I can recognize that in somebody else, and I'm, every once in a while try to ask that person, what do you think? Make
That's
sure
a good
that
colleague.
they
That's
are
a good
okay.
colleague.
And, and it comes also from coaching students a lot. Then we do have personality conflicts in student groups come up quite frequently. And as being a coach to college students, you have to put out those fires sometimes and help them negotiate.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Well, and actually one of the strategies...
Sorry, Lance has got just enough internet issues today that we've been stepping on each other, which we don't normally do. There's a difference between technically having the ability to speak up and then feeling like you really can safely. Like, those are two, and that's something that I've kind of had to learn as I've gotten older, is identifying when those two things are the case. Because I've pretty much never, not all, but most of the time I feel comfortable speaking up no matter what the circumstance is. But that's not good and it's not bad, it just is. And if somebody is, like, less, assertive, that's not good, that's not bad. In fact, you get too many assertive people in a band, then it's a problem. If you get too many, passive people in a band, it's a problem. A mix is what is usually healthiest. But yeah, you got to make sure, like you said, identifying whether it's students or colleagues and actually asking them, is important. Yeah, that's so vital.
Well, one of the strategies I've had some success with is you give people, you can do it literally or you can do it figuratively. Give them 3 pennies or nickels or rocks or poker chips, and you put them in your left pocket. And each time you talk, one of those chips goes from your left pocket to your right pocket. So if you're somebody who tends to talk a lot, you have to decide, is this worth burning a chip on? And if you're someone who doesn't talk a lot, then you are looking for ways to, I only have to talk 3 times, and then is this a good opportunity for me to do so? So it's a nice leveler for folks.
I'm going to try that at our next family gathering.
Oh, good luck.
Oh,
You're going to need more chips.
she is thinking of a specific uncle right now, yeah, or cousin, or there's like or 2 of them. That's I was just reminded of Jeff Jarvis, who I love, who's a journalism professor, but he once knew a guy who some real stuffy guy from Princeton who was opposed to using exclamation points like when written communication because it was too dramatic, and he said that he had decided that he was only allowed to use 3 exclamation points in his entire life, and he had already used one of them. So this guy is just like, this 50-year-old man is like sitting on his last 2 exclamation points for when it was really important, which is what I just thought of when you were talking about 3 poker chips in your pocket. That's pretty funny. Let's shift. I want to look at the time. Let's shift to the Stiletto Brass Quintet a little bit. I know that you've played a lot with them. How did you first get involved with that group?
Well, they asked me to sub about 5 years ago, and the current trombonist Nikki Abisi, I think she was having a child at the time, and so she needed a sub, and so they called me, and I had known them a little bit through IWBC, also playing with the Monarch Brass, and so I was happy to do that. I think my first performances with them were, I think we did a tour of the Midwest from Illinois area, and then the next time they called me to sub was to Mexico, which was a fantastic opportunity, and we played at a summer music festival in Aguascalientes, and that was just, it was incredible. It was so great working with the students down there that I immediately went home and started learning Spanish, so if I ever went again I could communicate a little bit better and just fall in love with the culture. So after that, I think it was pretty quickly after that that Nikki decided to resign and focus more on her career in New York and her family, and so they asked me to be a permanent member just before the pandemic. And so we have played. I mean, we went before the pandemic started. We did a tour of Florida, and we did a recording session last summer and have a CD coming out from that. And so we've tried to be active despite the conditions around us.
Right.
But it's been such a great group. Amy and Velvet, they go way back, and they had a brass quintet, I think in the 90s even, and this has always been a passion of theirs, and so they're the idea people. They come up with the tours and the planning and logistics, and it's kind of nice actually just to go along with the ride for a change and not have to plan and not have to do the administrative stuff that we all have to do so much in higher education. So
it's really nice going to conferences. Yeah, you should try that, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. And so they just say, hey, we have this opportunity in the fall, this kind of tour for a week. We just did Arkansas last fall, a few schools in Arkansas, not northern Arkansas though. We didn't manage to go to that school, but so we did a tour there, and they just say, hey, we have this, can you be there? Sure, I can be there. And so we get together and rehearse for a day usually, and then perform right away.
Cool. That's I'm a huge fan of Velvet. She's she's great. Like it just even if it was only her tuba playing, then I would like, and nothing about her personally, then I would say, I would heap praise on Velvet, because she's just such a solid player, like in so many different settings. It's like she's one of those players where it sounds like whatever she's doing when she plays in a brass quintet, it sounds like that's what she's done her whole life. Not that she hasn't played in brass quintet, but and then you hear her as a soloist, and it sounds like she plays solos all the time. She just sounds like it's always home base, which is like as big a compliment as I can give, because it's just everything sounds very authentic. So, and she happens to be a kick-ass human, which is actually more important than the music. But just the music alone is enough. So she's wonderful.
She makes it's very easy to play, and I never have to worry about pitch or rhythm because she just lays it down and I can just fit in, and it's really easy to play with her. And one funny story, when we played at a college in Arkansas, they had an interesting opportunity, I guess, because at UCA they were having a low brass day nearby in the same town, and so Gene Picorni was a guest artist there at the time, and so Gail Robertson, who was euphonium teacher at UCA, brought Gene Picorni to sit in with the ensemble that was accompanying Stiletto Brass, like the student ensemble at this small college.
Nice.
And so little did we know that Gene Picorni would be in the tuba section. This was, I think, in October of this year. And so it was Gail.
Awesome.
And Velvet had this huge, it was kind of like a Dixieland but jazzy solo in one of the pieces. And she realized that Gene Picorni was going to be like run row behind her watching this. And she's so funny because you cannot read her a lot of the time, you know, like right. she'll come out with these great jokes that you're not expecting because you can't read her. And she just was like, I am not okay. That's all she said. Right before we went on stage, and she nailed it. And what was so great was, what was so great was that I could see from my viewpoint, Gene Picorni behind her, just rocking and, you know, enjoying it so much, her solo, you know, nodding his head. And it was just, it was really fun.
That's awesome.
A friend of mine, he guest conducted this community band in Chicago. I can't remember what the band is, but Gene plays clarinet in this community band.
What?
And so this guy is like conducting, he's looking over, he's like, just can't put his head around the fact that he's conducting Gene Picorni, but Gene Picorni's playing clarinet.
Oh my gosh.
I've thought about, like, it would be fun to like to learn how to play like the cello and to join like a community orchestra. Would be fun. Mm-hmm. Like it'd be kind of interesting to be able to play some of that rep and to play like, I love the tuba. I love tuba parts. Don't email me, but like but like cello parts. It's like we can't hang with cello. It's like they get all the best stuff. So it'd be interesting to experience it from inside of the ensemble. That's awesome. That's awesome about Gene rocking out to Velvet. And also, Velvet's one of the best tuba players in the world, and she was like, she was nervous and like. So,
we all have those moments,
right? We all have those moments, and but she had done the work so that that even when her brain was going faster, I'm guessing going faster than it normally would have, than like say it was B sitting there instead of Gene, then like it's like then great, but she still stepped up. So if you're young and you're nervous, it's normal, and if it happens to Velvet Brown, it's going to happen to you as well.
Oh yeah, everybody.
So there.
So let's talk about your main gig, which is teaching at UNT. UNT and Indiana kind of go back and forth each year between who's the bigger school of music entity. And so, what's it like? How big is the trombone studio?
So the trombone studio can be as big as 70 members. I think right now, because of COVID, we're just down a little bit, so somewhere over 60. But it's huge. I was nervous when I first came. Like, how is this going to work? It's just so big. But with 3 full-time faculty, me and Tony Baker and Steve Menard, and we also have a full-time jazz faculty member, Nick Finzer now. It actually works really well because the student-to-teacher ratio is quite small. I teach 12 students, and so it's like you have your own studio like you would at a small university where you're keeping track of these students, constantly texting, emailing, listening to recordings. They get plenty of face-to-face time, but it's like you've got multiple of those studios combined, and we have a departmental class every Wednesday where all of the trombone students come, and it's a performance class. We have guest artists sometimes, and we have a student activity group that hosts social events, and we try and keep it like one big family. We also believe that the classical and trombone sides shouldn't be separate, that they should be combined and supportive of one another, and that everybody should learn how to do both from each other. So we don't separate that at all. They come to the same departmental, and we do jazz focus days there too, and encourage classical students to play in the lab bands and vice versa. And so I really think it works out really well. The size means that you're always learning from somebody. You're never going to be the best at everything, right? And so even if you're one of the best players, somebody's still going to be better at you than some part of trombone playing, right? And so you can always look up and learn from somebody. And it's a little bit of a microcosm of the actual trombone world. And so if you're doing well in our studio, it's pretty good indication that you can compete and do pretty well in the trombone world too if you keep working at it. So it gives a more realistic point of view. I didn't have going to University of Michigan. It wasn't a huge studio at the time, and so I had no idea if I could compete. And a little bit of that kept affecting my self-esteem until I started going to summer festivals and realizing, wait, I can do this on a more national level. I just wasn't aware that I could. I think in this regard, you do have a better litmus test that if you can succeed at the size of this school, that you can do it outside too. And along with big programs, like we have 1,600 music majors, I think, there are tons of ensemble offerings and variety of ensembles. And so that's another positive. We wouldn't be able to have 8 lab bands with 4 to 5 trombones in each section if we didn't have a lot of trombone players. So it gives a lot of opportunity for everybody, and everybody can play in a large ensemble. You know, it's not like we're only a few people get to audition in and actually get a chance to play in a large ensemble. So I really love the program. I'm so happy there. I love the students too, and I just think it's such a great place.
How do you decide who goes into whose studio?
Well, what we tell people is that there's an audition day before classes start in August, and that's a studio and ensemble placement day. And so they have a packet of music they get on August 1st that they practice and then come in and play for the 3 of us, and we place them on an A list or in a B list, and the A list people go to the top 5, I think, ensemble directors and audition another time for those ensembles. And then the B list audition for the bottom or so 5 or 6 ensemble directors for those ensembles. And but at the first audition, that's when we decide who goes into a faculty studio. And unfortunately, it can't be everybody. I mean, we have teaching fellows, and they have to have people to teach also, because that's part of their training, to go out and teach in the real world. And so I would say the top 40, maybe 36 to 40, study with professors, the 3 of us, and then the others study with teaching fellows. It's not a punitive thing, for sure, and I think that a lot of the students that do study with teaching fellows appreciate the lack of pressure, and they're more music education students who want to teach and they're very motivated to sound great at the trombone. They're all great students, but they don't want that pressure of performing at a high level every week. The teaching fellows also are amazing, great players. They have professional orchestral careers, some of them, so we're not sticking them with people that never taught before or played before. These are all people at a really high level, and we're always, we observe the teaching and try and maintain communication with them every week through a meeting. So we try and keep tabs on everybody's playing really well. And we see the students play in departmental and juries and midterms. And so when we see a student really starting to play at a higher level, we'll then immediately switch them into a professor's studio. And it works out pretty well. I feel like everybody's pretty content where they are.
When someone gets into your studio, say, do they stay in your studio then for the duration of their tenure there, or might they move around?
Yeah, we try, especially for undergrads. We think that continuity of instruction is really important because it can be confusing to have them move around. Yeah. So with undergrad students, we really do try. In rare cases, between conversation with the faculty member and the student, we might decide that another studio is better for them. with both parties agreeing. That hardly ever happens. Or in very rare cases, a student will cease to perform well and remove themselves from the situation, I guess, for lack of a better term. But that's very rare. Usually we have the same students for the whole time. And obviously, grad students are slightly different. They come to UNT sometimes wanting to study with all three of us, doctoral students, for example. And if that's the case, then we're all for that. If they want to do a year with each of us, then we're fine with that as well. And that happens more frequently, I would say, where somebody would come and do a year or two with one and then switch. And we're very open. If a student wants to go take lessons with one of the three of us outside of our weekly lesson, then we always say yes.
And then here's how do you recruit how do you recruit more non-traditional students? How do you not just get a studio of 70 white dudes?
Right. Yeah, it's hard, especially in Texas. We have a lot of challenges, and I'm embarrassed by the lack of female students. And, wherever I taught before, it was much easier, and there were many more female students. We obviously have a stronger community of Hispanic students. And African American students, but not female students. And so that's something I'm always trying. I mean, I'm out there, I'm trying just being myself, but I don't know if it's the nature of the feeder programs in the schools in Texas. I don't see that many high school female trombone students, unfortunately, when I go and judge competitions or do master classes, that I would in the East Coast area or the upper Midwest. So I don't know if something's happening to discourage these students along the way, if it's band directors or just a lack of role models being presented to them or a lack of feeling included. It could be it. And I don't know if it's the political climate that is not attracting graduate students, for example, to come to a school in Texas. I wouldn't blame them necessarily. I had a trans student who was very interested, but just finally said, I just can't consider coming to Texas this year. I get it. I understand. And so they went somewhere else. And there are a lot of challenges. I feel that UNT is such a welcoming, amazing place. We have 3 women brass faculty, and I've always felt that I belong and I'm valued, and from day one. I mean, I've never had an issue. And we've also met with the female brass students and had a kind of a Zoom support group one night during the pandemic just to connect with them and see how they were doing. And I think that was a fun thing to do, just more of a venting or social thing. But we can't assume that female students are better off these days than I was, and we want to check in with them and make sure. And so there are things that we've been trying to do, and hopefully hosting IWBC will help, bring in some more female students. It's not an issue in the horn studio. That seems to be more of an instrument where women are, more of the majority, but yeah, definitely in the low brass, it's still a challenge.
Mm-hmm. If you have more thoughts on this, and if we wanted to start talking about the Chromatic Collective, I'd be all for it. But before we do, and if not, we'll go in whatever direction we need to go into. But before we do that, I need to remind Andrew that Houchin Horns aims to spread the joy of music through providing the highest level of products, services, and resources to the brass playing community. They have a 15-day money-back guarantee with free shipping on all instruments and accessories, with multiple easy financing options on all inventory. Terms and conditions apply, both in and on. They have mouthpieces by Greg Black, Lasky, Pickett, Schilke, and more. Repairs and customizations are done in-house. You can browse vintage and consignment instruments at houchinhorns.com. You can browse the extensive news and resources. There's a lot of browsing involved if you want to check them out. Browse the extensive news and resources page at houchinhorns.com for great pedagogical info, articles, interviews, videos, and events to browse. And if you enter the promo code Junkies while you're browsing at online checkout, you'll receive 10% off your purchase from houchinhorns.com. Some browsing limitations apply.
Something wrong with you.
Clearly. Okay, so how is it that the Chromatic Brass Collective got onto your radar and then became a part of the event?
Well, the IWBC has a diversity committee, and actually Velvet Brown is on that committee, since we already mentioned her, and Marquita Reef and Dan Burdick. And this was a big proposal they had when they first started a few years ago to bring an ensemble of color. There wasn't enough representation at IWBC conferences of people of color, and it was an area that we needed to address. And so we funded a big project proposal for them to come to IWBC as an ensemble. And we also, along with that, did other diversity training initiatives within our organization. And it added such a great energy to the conference. It was just so amazing. And the music they played was so diverse too. They had a chamber music concert also, and it was fantastic. That's actually the one thing I went to, the whole conference. But yeah, it was great, and we need to keep also attracting younger people. I mean,
Right.
and so these women generally are under the age of 30, which is great, and so they just bring this great energy to the organization and the conference.
It's so great that there are people like you in positions of power that are, and not you alone, lots of people, but like that you're just thinking about all this stuff. The importance of attracting diverse participants, diverse audience, younger people. I mean, it's like, even if it was only for self-preservation, then those are all really good ideas, right? I mean, even if it was only selfishly for your organization, of course you need to be developing younger people coming to your conference, because who do you think is going to come to the conference in 20 years if it's only,
Right.
not to get morbid, but if it's only old people now, like they ain't going to be coming to conferences in 20 years. So but it obviously goes way, way, way beyond that. But it's refreshing to hear people thinking through stuff as much as you are, from recruiting to programming to to hosting conferences. It's vital. So thank you for all that work.
Well, it's a tremendous responsibility hosting a conference, especially an international conference. And in the past, it hasn't been great. And, there's that famous conference from 2012, the International Trombone Festival, where there were no women guest artists or composers.
Like
And I think
zero, like literally
zero.
zero.
Zero. Yeah, and that's, it comes up a lot. And so that's what started getting me thinking more about diversity in programming and what I could do. Because around that same time, somebody asked me, it was around the same time I started teaching at my first college teaching job, a little before that somebody said to me, "Do you know any pieces written by women for trombone?" And I was embarrassed to know none. And embarrassed that I had never thought about it, I mean, I was so entrenched in this man's world that I didn't even see outside of it either. And so that's what started me. I better go and do some research and find out. So I have an answer to this question next time somebody asks me. I mean, this is embarrassing. And so that launched like 8 years of research into diverse repertoire for trombone.
Which leads us very, very professionally into the last thing I wanted to talk about, which was your album, Breaking Ground, a celebration of women composers, that came out in 2017, which has 4 different works for trombone and piano. When did you get the inspiration to make this album?
Well, I was teaching at Towson University, and I was looking for a valuable sabbatical project. So every 6 years in higher education, you can apply to do a sabbatical. And I wanted to make my mark. I wanted to do something important to me. And over the last couple years before that, that's when I had started really getting into more research of composers and started developing relationships with these composers. And I thought that would be a great way to help promote them, help get their music out there, help people realize how great this music was. And it's not because they're not good composers that we haven't heard them. They just haven't had the audience. They haven't had the exposure. And so I started picking my favorites, I guess, out of the early repertoire I was able to find. There's so much more now. I mean, so much. Well, you could have 5 more CDs now, but at the time, the composers that I had met and talked to, I really believed in their music. And as a luxury of being a professional in a position where you have artistic choice, I could do recitals only of music that I liked. And because you teach the same pieces over and over again, that's just not the music you're attracted to perform anymore. And so I wanted to diversify my own repertoire when I was doing solo recitals. And it wasn't going to be the Grandal and the Tomasi, you know. So this music was fresh. The great thing with having relationships with new composers that are excited about people playing their pieces, they come to the recitals a lot, and you can have them introduce the music, and the audience gets more excited, and they feel like they're more of a part of the process from start to finish. And so it just created a much more exciting energy at recitals that I was doing, to have the actual composers there and talk about their music. And yeah, it just became a passion of mine, and where my career has mostly been focused outside of teaching in the past, maybe now 10 years.
Wonderful.
So someone comes to you now with a question that was asked of you 8 years ago. Where do you send them?
I send them to my webpage, because I have a database now of trombone compositions written by women, everything from one trombone to, I don't know, anything that includes trombone, chamber music. So I think the last time I counted, it was, I don't know how many pieces, like 650 pieces or something crazy like that. So it went from none to 650 in the last 10 years. And we're working toward getting a lot of that music put onto a diversity composition database on the ITA's webpage that Brett Schuster has been spearheading, and I've been helping to get more of the compositions on there. But it takes a lot of work to input all the fields for each composition. And so that one has about 100 pieces now, and we're looking for anyone to submit works. You can just, even if you're not an ITA member, you can go on the composition database, click submit composition, and enter the fields. And so I had some doctoral students do it this year for the lit class also. But so we're working on migrating that to a more public place for trombones to use as a resource.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Do you know of similar, thank goodness this is a thing. And then do you know of similar efforts for the other brass instruments?
No, I did look into some. I'm chair of the ITA's diversity committee, and I did look into other organizations and what they were doing. I saw a couple. Double Reeds are doing great. They have a great composition database. I can't remember the other instruments, other brass instruments. I don't think I saw anything. Maybe there was a horn one somewhere, but I don't know if it was on their official webpage. But there are actual people that play horn and trumpet doing this, though. And I know that it's always a question on Facebook, you know, does anyone know a piece by a woman? And that these people are like me, kind of keepers of their own list. So there is one for trumpet and horn that's out there that you just have to ask the right people to find. But there's great databases now that are starting to be developed. The Institute for Composer Diversity, the I don't know, Diversify the Stand people. They're doing great stuff too. So there are other resources now that are out there that are getting really exciting.
I have one of my students who came down to the event is very passionate about this, and she's really put together a pretty good database of euphonium, well, some trombone and some tuba, because euphoniums are omnivores. We're taking everybody's stuff. So she's got the makings of one. So I'm gonna send her your way.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You said something really powerful a few minutes ago, where you talked about the.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
It was. I have heard Lance say some profound things, not in the last few minutes. No, it was Natalie. Believe it or not, it was the luxury of being The luxury, the internet lag today is spectacular because we just keep stepping on each other. The luxury of being in a position where you have artistic choice in what you perform. And I like how you put that, because when you were playing with the Delaware Symphony, you didn't just get to you couldn't just like send an email on like, Sunday night and say, hey, this week we're actually going to be doing, this piece by,
Right.
no, it's like it was scheduled in the printer, posters are made. It's like you play what you play, or they would find someone to do your job for you. But I just like how you phrase that, because when I get paid to go and do a residency at a university and talk about music entrepreneurship, and I do a recital and all that stuff, like nobody tells me what to play. So I'm actually in a position where I have the luxury to decide, which means that I should be taking, and I do frequently, but like I need to be taking advantage of like the fact that I'm in that position, and choose intentionally, rather than ending up with the equivalent of the the Tomasi and the Grundal, which are perfectly
Right.
fine pieces, but I also
Great
don't need to
pieces.
hear those ever again. Like I don't need to hear Nikki, who you mentioned before, or you, or anybody play I'd much rather hear you all play something like different, like just
Right.
something different, But
Yeah,
I
of
like how you put
course.
that, though. It was kind of a little bit of a call to action for anybody who's in a position where they get to make those decisions.
Yeah, and for I think me too. I mean, I have to remember that I'm very lucky, and I have this job where I have creative control, total creative control, which most people don't get. And
Yeah,
I certainly didn't have that in the military, and
of
we
course.
don't have creative control. I can't call them and say, I don't want to end this program with Stars and Stripes
Lance,
tonight.
Lance didn't even have control of his behavior. Yeah, he had.
No, nothing. You have control of nothing. Yeah, you sign that all away, right? Even your hair. So when I made the switch to college teaching, it was just a revelation. Like, I can do whatever I want, really. I mean, even what was weird was that even the people, your bosses, trust you, to
Mhm.
do. Oh, you want to do that? Okay, that sounds like a great idea. Good luck. Like you don't have to ask permission to have this guest artist or this trombone day or whatever,
Right.
And so it's really empowering, and we're lucky.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, good stuff. All
I
right.
tried just doing what I wanted, but it never worked out all that well.
I like the fact that Lance always described it that he and the Air Force came to a mutual agreement that it would be best if they went their separate ways. Yeah, that was that was one of those, like, it's like who dumped who? It's like, no, we literally dumped each other. It was at the exact same time. This wasn't like like you dumped me and I'm like, no, I'm dumping you first. It was like we're like, no, we're good. We're both good. I won't write. It's not me, it's you, and I know it's not you, it's me. It's like we're good. All right. Well, we are just about at the end here, but I am going to talk to you about your practicing tip. This is the Practicing Corner presented by Hitz Academy Practice Coaching. Want to get more done in less time in the practice room, like compound interest in a bank account? Making yourself even just 10% more efficient in the practice room will make you a better practicer forever. And those results will continue to compound for literally the rest of your career, as long as you know where your instrument is, right, Lance? Let practice coaching from Hitz Academy help you implement systems that will improve every aspect of your practicing, do better at auditions, and unlock your true potential as a musician, which Lance is still waiting to do. Learn more at practicecoach.link/coaching, which you can find in the show notes. So, Natalie, what practice tip do you have for Lance today?
Well, one of the things you just mentioned was get more done in a shorter amount of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a few years ago, I read an article on the Pomodoro technique, which some musicians have heard of, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really efficient focus for 25-minute periods of time. And they determined that this is the maximum amount of time where somebody could be really focused on any task. And so I used that in practicing, and it really changed everything about the way I approached practicing, my preparation for recitals, fatigue, everything. I used to think I had to practice in hour-long chunks because somebody told me you have to practice 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours, and so I'm like, okay, 1 hour here, 1 hour here, 1 hour here. And I ended up getting so injured I had to have lip surgery when I was in grad school. Yeah. So I knew there was probably a better way. And this 25-minute chunk of time, I even have an app that I sometimes start. It's called Be Focused. It just counts down from 25 minutes.
I've got
Has
that
really
app.
helped. And yeah, I make sure to set a goal for the 25 minutes too. And so goal setting was relatively new to me also. And so it can also help engage you in a more creative way than just going by rote and what you're used to doing. So if you set a goal like for 25 minutes, I'm going to work on my legato playing. For 25 minutes, I'm going to work on this skill that I want to, or this piece that I want to. It goes so fast that you don't want to waste any minutes, right? And you really want to focus and get as much as you can out of that 25 minutes. And for me, with a busy life, with work-life balance and a family, 25 minutes is much less daunting than trying to fit an hour in. And so I know that I can get 25 minutes between cooking dinner and putting my daughter to bed, for example. And so I'm more likely to practice more. Whereas if I had an hour, I would just give up. I just can't do it. I guess I won't get to it tonight. And I tell my students that all the time too. If you think in smaller chunks, you're more likely to fit that time in during your day. And it doesn't seem like, if you have no motivation, a whole hour seems like really depressing to think about, right?
Yes,
but 25 minutes, you can do anything for 25 minutes. That's not a huge deal. And so it's less just mentally challenging to get up there and start practicing in your practice room. But so that's really helped me. And I think that would be one of my top practice tips.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, excellent stuff. Yeah, boy, when I'm not motivated, an hour can feel like I'm, 7 again, and I'm in the back of the car, and I'm like ready to be there, and there's another hour and 45 minutes left in the drive, and I'm just sitting there going like,
Yeah.
how am I going to survive this? It's
Right.
like, that's like at that age, it was just like, I don't think I can do this. Like, I had a very easy childhood, so those were the traumatizing, memories. But it's like, but it can kind of feel like that on an emotional level when I'm not feeling the practicing thing, and especially with performances are coming back, of course, but this, during the pandemic, like I just was not motivated to practice at all. Like, I just
No, it was rough.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so it was, yeah. If I had tried to sit down for an hour, that would it would have taken me many attempts to get to an hour. So unless I could total it up, 3 minutes here, 90 seconds there, yeah, and then I'm good. Wow, this is wonderful. We're going to have Natalie hang out for the bonus episode, which is available for our Patreon. Well, I was yeah. Anyway, we would edit this out if we took this seriously, but we won't. We'll just leave it in. Just like I actually already messaged. He hasn't read it yet, but I've already messaged Bruce that said that we were interviewing you and that he was going to enjoy me being a tuba player in the middle. So the University of North Arkansas. Or did I say Northern? I don't remember.
Northern Arkansas.
Northern
Those
Arkansas.
are two different schools.
Yeah, it's like NAU. Oh, you mean in Flagstaff? No, the one in Arkansas. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna have Natalie hang out for the bonus episode, which is available to all of our Patreon patrons. Lance and I have both got these book of questions, two different ones where we're going to ask you some probing questions where we have stumped some people with them. Sometimes we skip the actually disturbing ones, like like the Sophie's Choice, like which child did you save? It's like, no, we don't go there, but and we also like to keep things light in the bonus episode. But if you want to become a Patreon patron, you can get access to a whole lot of bonus content from former guests and some other stuff as well. So you can go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies. Natalie, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been great, and appreciate everything you do.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Of course. And that's going to do it for this episode of The Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to hear the bonus episode featuring today's guest, please visit patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to learn how you can support the show and instantly access all bonus materials, as well as gain access to a special patron-only Facebook group. The Brass Junkies is produced by the amazing, wonderful, and truly inspirational Will Houchin. The theme music was composed by Fernando Dados and performed by Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. We are at Pray for Jens on Twitter and Instagram and have a Facebook page at facebook.com/prayforjens. You can find out more about the Brass Junkies and all the other Pedal Note Media podcasts at pedalnotemedia.com. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.